I was so nervous in the beginning because I knew it was coming. I knew you're just a bigot. You're just a racist. You're just this. You're just that. You're homophobic. You're transphobic. Like I knew all of that was coming. I was like bracing myself for it, but I wasn't ready for it when it did like kick off.
Hey, what's up, guys? X Morgan from My Spiritual Life, and today I'm so excited to have Freely Ashley on here as my guest today. She is a political, social commentator, YouTube, TikTok star. I am just so thrilled. I'm so thrilled and so honored that she took the time to talk with me today. Now, before we get into what we're going to talk about, I want to tell you guys a little bit about why I wanted to have Ashley on for this video. Ashley has a really unique perspective to share with us today because she was really far left in her political beliefs and had what I will effectively call a faith crisis around her political opinions. And I call it a faith crisis because it was so deeply disruptive to her psychologically that her experience mimics that of those of us who actually have left religious cults. So, before we get into it, I want to note a couple things. Oftentimes, when we think of cults, we exclusively think of religious groups, but this is not always the case. So, Hessen, the cult expert guy, defines cult through his BITE model that outlines cult behavior, which is behavioral control, information control, thought control, emotional control. A cult can be any group of people that exhibits control over its members through means of social shaming, manipulating, coercing, etc. Cult-like behavior is not exclusive to religions. It can be found in social groups, within businesses, within families, or on either side of the political spectrum, in person or online. And I think it's really important to talk about this because people like me who have left a religion, we are very, very prone to falling prey to another cult. And ex-cult members like me, we think like, no, that's not going to happen. I left a cult. I know what they're like. That's never going to happen again. But the problem is that our brains are actively working against us with regards to this. And the reason why is that when you grew up in a cult, your entire mental framework was built around outsourcing your sense of right and wrong onto some other authority. And as long as that's the case, your brain is working against you, which means that you are likely to fall prey to another cult again and not even realize it. And the other thing I want to point out about that too is that it's not likely that, you necessarily jump from one religious cult to another. It could be something more subtle, something not quite as extreme as what you left. But keeping in mind that this is a potentiality that you need to be on the lookout for because your mind is programmed to very deeply rely on that group think mentality that like some group is going to give you all the answers and you can just hold on to all those answers to make all your decisions. So I'm really excited to have Ashley to share her story and her perspective because I think it's really important for us as ex-cult members to keep in the forefront of our mind that no group or ideology has all the perfect answers, right? And that's why it's so important that we continue to learn to think critically, to think for ourselves, to build our own personal moral framework around principles that can hold true no matter what. And that is the best way we can ensure we don't lose our individuality and fall prey to a cult again. I know for me, I want to be able to be free to think for myself, to wrestle with ideas, to hear other people's sides and be able to change my mind. And I know Ashley feels the same. So, Ashley, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Hell yeah. Okay, so here's what I want to talk about. Tell me, starting off, before you kind of had this transition from political left to some of the other ideas that you have now, how far left were you? And I wonder if you could kind of outline that briefly for me.
Yeah, I think I was farther left than I thought I was. I didn't even realize that I had gotten to that point. And I was fairly naive as well, in regards to a lot of the ideas that I had. So just to kind of outline it a little bit, I was okay. It's always like a big list of things when I have to break it down, but I was I was pro-choice. I was like pro-gun reform, anti-police, anti-military. I was for socialism. I thought capitalism was evil and bad and all of these things. Oh gosh, what else? Like there's just a million things. Like I was really super supportive of like all the gender ideology stuff, although it wasn't at the degree that it is now. Because I feel like within the last 5 years that has just been radically like catapulted and escalated. But anyway, I've always been like I was liberal, kind of in my views growing up, but I wasn't fairly like political at all. And then in my early 20s, I would say I kept hearing all these ideas and thinking, oh, that sounds good. Oh yeah, you're totally right. Like I was a super feminist as well. And I got into a weird space where I was like, had the kind of like mindset of like hate all men or think all men are evil, except like the ones that like in my life, you know what I mean? Except like my
Except the
husband
good
and all
ones.
of that,
Yeah.
which is just really ironic to me now that I think about that. And it's just like, I don't know, that laundry list of just things that I thought sounded good on the surface, but I hadn't really delved deep. I hadn't really looked up the history of a lot of these things, which I'm still like weeding my way through because at this point, I feel like there's so many things I want to learn. And the more I learn, it feels like the less I know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like
Yes. Yes.
that, so it's just this
The more you
constant
learn, the more
drive.
yeah. Yeah.
You realize that what you don't know. Yeah. It's just a
Yep. Yep.
constant drive for me now to educate myself and to look at things more objectively and to learn history in a better way. Because I don't think even, in public school, it's not taught the way it should be. And there's so many things that are left out. And obviously you're a kid and they're just trying to give you like, the main outline of everything. But it's very rare people really start actually delving into these things and learning like what the actual outcomes will be. Because I think on the surface, an idea can sound really, really good and it can sound wonderful and be well intentioned, but the outcome that doesn't mean the outcome is necessarily positive. And I think that's the big problem today and how I was viewing the world also. And I will say I was in a much more like, I was very jaded. I was very angry just about my own things, like had nothing to do with politics, like just a lot of anger from the way I grew up, a lot of things that I went through, a lot of trauma, especially. And I was just particularly vulnerable to this idea of like a utopian like world. Like I wanted a world where like
Oh,
we could all share
wow.
everything and like nobody owned anything anymore and we could like just cohabitate and like there's no more money. And it's just like, well, that's crazy. Like that's a crazy way to
Right,
look at
right.
things.
Well, I
um,
like that you explain it that way too, because though, like what you're saying is why it was so enticing to you, right? Because there's
mhm.
a lot of really enticing ideas that don't work out when you take them to their logical conclusion, right? But I love that explanation because I think that so as people who have left religious cults, right? Which is like the people I'm speaking to is that I think it's so easy for us to say like we were so judged growing up, we were so criticized, like we just want acceptance. We just like we don't want to judge anyone ever. Like we're burnt out on judgment. And so like that's what makes all of these ideas really enticing. But again, there's danger with the ideology when you take it too far. So, yeah, I can really
Mhm.
relate that. Tell me, what kind of got you as far left as you were? And you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but like, I mean, were your parents politically, inclined at all? Like, did you grow up with talking about politics at home? Was it mostly at school that you heard these things or on social media?
Growing up, politics wasn't really at the forefront. I grew up in poverty. I grew up amidst a lot of hardships. Grew up super poor, and it was really like survival mode most of the time. I do remember some like remnants of like my parent complaining about Bush a lot and just being like, oh, Bush is such an idiot and I hate him and blah blah blah, and just kind of murmurings like that, but it wasn't
Right.
really at the forefront. But I basically, like, I grew up secular. I was an atheist from, like, I don't know, like 5, 6 years old. I had the thought that God didn't exist. And like that just kind of progressed as I got older. And I actually became like a militant atheist when I was like in my 20s. But so grew up very secular, no stability. My parent had a very victim mentality mindset, and it was like everything bad was just happening to us. It wasn't like anything that she ever did, which most of the bad things happened because of things she did or didn't do, or whatever. So,
Man.
but yeah. And then she was also like, I mean, she was pro-choice. Like she supported abortion, which that got crazy too. It was basically like I was set up as, like, I don't know, a product of my environment, because there's a lot of people in poverty. There's who are just kind of victims of circumstance, who are just trying to get by, right? But there's a lot of people who make a lot of bad decisions, and they just keep doing that throughout their whole life. And a lot of people don't want to admit that, but that's all I saw growing up. And but I tend to have like I'm very compassionate anyway, so I always wanted to like help people, and I want people taken care of. And I think it was a big part was like I wasn't taken care of like I should be. So it kind of almost like
everyone else.
Yeah, and like who does that? Well, the government provides things to you. They make sure that you have everything that you need. And I feel like it was a very subconscious type of thing, but now looking back, I think that's what really happened, is because I wasn't taken care of. I didn't want other people to go through that. And there's, when there's nobody to take care of you, like you have to look towards a higher authority, so to speak. And I think that's what that became. And not having any type of grounding also. So
I love the way you framed that up, because I find it all so very relatable to like my past experience. And I think, I don't know, it is so interesting, like that coming from that space of like, I wasn't taken care of. I want to fight for people who weren't taken care of, and not realizing that some of it really was due to some bad parenting that was going on. And we don't like framing it up like that, because we're so resistant to shame, right? And anyways, Jordan Peterson talks about this, that whole concept of like, if you allow someone to be blameless, then you rob them of all power to fix their life, right? And some people really are victims of a certain circumstance, but if they're victim entirely of everything that's going wrong in their life, and there's nothing they can do about any of it, then their life can never get better. So that's, it's that contrast of like, okay, do you want to be a victim, or do you want to be empowered? And so anyway, I love that you brought that up. So tell me, what got you to start to question? And I'll link below your I Left the Left video. I know in that you talk about Trump and the election in 2016. I don't know if you have anything before that you want to mention. Like, what got you to question, those kind of stances that you had previously?
Yeah. Fair warning for that video too. It was my very first video, so the audio quality is absolutely atrocious. So like, I'm sorry for anybody who watches that, but I've gotten better.
You should say you're welcome. You should say you're welcome. At least they get to hear a cool story. Yeah, I get you.
But no, so no, it really was that pivotal moment of, so, a lot of people get confused on my story because like my husband is my husband now, but at the time he wasn't my husband. Like we had been dating for years at that point. I've been with him since I was 19. And I am 30 now,
what we call, you were just living in sin. That's what we call it as religious people. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Anyway,
sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, we had bought a house by that point. So like we were like trying, we were getting there. Like, but
well, hopefully you weren't drinking coffee. That would have been even worse.
Oh, I'm addicted. So I would be the most sinnery. Like I'm very sinful.
The most sinnery morbid. All right, sorry.
Actually, yeah, no. So So yeah, it was really, so when the whole Trump fiasco, like I hated Trump so much, and it was only because of the media. It was because the media injected that into my brain so much. It was just smear campaign after smear campaign. Look at all these horrible things he said. Look at all the horrible things he's done. When before he ran for president, nobody had a problem with him, you know? And I see that now very clearly. It's like he was like, you know, people maybe didn't like him. He thought that he was an ass, or like, you know, he's had businesses that have failed. And I'm sure people were critical of that for sure. But it wasn't any type of discourse like it is now. And in 2016, when that election went down, like I ran right out and I was like, I'm going to vote for Hillary because it's not Trump. And I wasn't particularly excited to vote for her. It was just that, like, I need to fight back and I need to make sure this horrible man doesn't get into office and blah. So I got home that night and, like, you know, we're watching the election.
You should have voted harder. Oh, sorry. I just said you should have voted harder. Anyway, go ahead.
But yeah, and you know, those results started rolling in, and it was super late at night. Like I got home from work at like 11 o'clock or something. And then by the time like 2-3 in the morning rolled around, they had called it. And I had a meltdown. Like hysterical meltdown. It's so funny to me now. Like it was embarrassing for me to admit at first, but now it's just like Jesus. Like, but yeah, meltdown, crying, hysterical. I started screaming about how women were going to lose all their rights and gay people were going to lose all their rights, and we're going to go back to the dark ages, because that's what I've been told. That's what, like, I literally heard for months on end at that point. And I think I started raving about, like, you know, Trump supporters and how they're all racist and they're all homo and they're all these horrible, horrible people. And my husband was like, whoa, you got to hold on, wait a minute, because I have something to tell you. And he wasn't planning on voting originally, and he kind of went out at the last minute. He changed his mind, and he just decided, like, I feel like we should go a different way. And the funny thing is everyone was like, oh, he was conservative, so you just changed your mind because he was conservative. He wasn't at the time. Like, he knew nothing about politics. He just was like one of those like average, normal people. He had been liberal. Like, he was pro-choice. He was like, you know, always has been anti-establishment, whole 9 yards. Like, we grew up and we were like, I was an emo kid. He was a punk rocker. Like, that's, you know, so this idea that, like, I changed my mind because he did. No, he voted for Trump, and I chastised him actually I'm like, you don't even know anything about politics, like thinking I knew everything. I had all the answers, you know? And so he was like, he took that as a challenge. So he started learning more about philosophy. And then he got into Jordan Peterson and a lot of those types of characters, and just really trying to soak up a lot of that. Like, what are ideologies? How do people think? Why are people, you know, acting in this way and doing all of these things? And then he started to get into like political commentary, and he started like questioning things and kind of realizing, like, oh man, like these people are bringing up really good points. And he started doing a lot more of that type of thinking and critical thinking and research. And he would challenge me, and we would just go back and forth like that. And this happened over the course of like a year. And sometimes I have to look back on, like, I don't know, old social media posts of like my private accounts and stuff, and try to figure out, like, to piece together the timeline. Cause it's really hard sometimes when people are like, well, when did you change your mind about this, this, and this? And I'm like, bro, this has been a process. Like, it didn't happen overnight. And there's a lot of things where he would challenge me and I would just get angry, and I would get angry because I didn't have a good answer. Like, I didn't have a good rebuttal, or I couldn't argue my point, or he brought up such a good counterpoint that I was just like, whoa, like my brain broke. And I was like, I don't know how to handle this. And it's just really interesting looking back. And there was a lot of moments where he would kind of, he would bring something up, and it would be very objective, and he would be just saying, well, hey, what about this? Like a good example would be like when the baker with the gay wedding cake fiasco went down. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes.
But yeah, so he was bringing that up, and he was saying, well, he shouldn't have to be forced to make this cake. And my husband has no problem with gay people. You know what I mean? Like, he was looking at it from a like rights standpoint, a religious freedom standpoint,
Right.
a First Amendment, because that's a form of expression. You're doing like an artwork, basically, essentially. And
Right.
then
Right.
he tried to frame it like that. He was like, well, what if he was like a painter and somebody was trying to force him to paint something he didn't want to? Would that be okay? And he's asking me these questions, and I'm just
Where's the
getting more and
line?
more like
Where's the
enraged.
line? Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And like I remember like screaming at him, like being like who have you become? Like oh, it
Yes.
was so bad. Like I started like not questioning our relationship or anything like that, but I started like I was so confused, and I was like, and there was a lot of moments like that. And it took me a very long time to just calm down and draw back and just sit and go, what do I believe and why? And what, like, he's bringing out valid points, and why is that making me so angry? And like we would start going through this process of like we would just watch videos together, and then we would pause it and talk about it, or we would wait till it was over, which I usually couldn't. I'd be like, I don't agree with anything that they're saying. And one of the first videos was Jordan Peterson, and he had an interview with like, oh god, what was her name, like Camille Paglia or something like that. And that was the very first like video we ever watched together. And there was a lot of moments where I was like, I don't agree with that. I don't agree. And my husband just be like, that's okay. That's okay. Like, you don't have to agree. Like, let's talk about it. What don't you agree with and why? And he just kept doing that. And over, and just over time, it was just that this process of like just trying to like bring myself back emotionally and figure out why I had connected my emotions so strongly with my political beliefs. Because when you're doing that, it really does feel like anybody who kind of challenges what you're thinking or what you're saying, it feels like a personal attack. It feels like they're attacking you and not just your ideas. And that's really detrimental to people, to be so clung to an idea and so insecure about it as well, that you just immediately have a really harsh emotional reaction, as opposed to being like, okay, is what they're saying really that bad? And I think that's a really important process that more people really need to go through. And I continuously do that too. Like if somebody is challenging me, I sit back and I say, do they have merit? Or, are they bringing up a valid point, or are they just kind of just spewing, like not spewing, are they just repeating talking points that they've heard before? Or
Yes.
um you
Yes.
know if there's any comments, like I get a million hate comments, but there's comments that like get to me, like kind of get under my skin, and I, instead of like responding, I just like set my phone down and I go, why is that bothering me? Is there a shred
Yes.
of truth to that? If is this criticism correct, or am I feeling inept in some way, or like how can I correct
Yeah.
this myself, instead of feeling like, angry about what somebody wrote on the internet? Like, and I think that's just really important too, and it's driven me to learn more as well.
I think it's such a mature way of handling it, right? Because what you see on social media, and I think kind of the scary age that we live in is that anyone can go viral, right? Anyone with any
Mhm.
idea can immediately go viral. And and so there's this like there's all this information out there and it can sound really good, but then it's like, okay, but is this real? Does this really have merit? And I love how you take that opportunity to get curious and instead of lashing out and saying, no, I'm right, you're a bigot or whatever, you say, okay, does this criticism mean anything? What can I do better? Or to, kind of rationalize through why you were correct and they're not. And that's such a mature way of
Mhm.
handling that. It's not easy to do that. So I think that's really cool. So but coming back for a second, I like what you said about it's hard to say like when did my mind change, because it's such a journey, right? It's not like one day you're pro-choice and the next day you're pro-life, and it's the same with leaving a religion. There's a lot of parallels because it's like when people ask me like, "Well, why did you leave?" I'm like, "Well, there's like a million reasons why," and it was all just like little things that all added up to just changing the way that I was seeing the world. Oh, and one more comment I'll say too is within religious context, you'll have people who will argue things, right? On either side, like ex-Mormons versus Mormons or whatever. And they have a similar problem, which is that the members they will say, well, God says gay marriage is not allowed. And then the ex members will say, why does God care? And they'll say, excuse you for questioning the Lord. And they get really angry and so defensive, instead of, just thinking like, wait a second, maybe I could think about this. And it's hard to say what God really wants. We all like to think that we know what God wants. And I don't, I'm agnostic. But anyway, I digress. So tell me, uh, what kind of launched off of that? Like, can you remember, was there a point where you're like, actually, now I feel like I'm, more over here on this side? Or
So I think a big turning point for me was, instead of like just watching content and discussing with my husband, I forced myself to go listen to other perspectives and other viewpoints. And I did that a lot. Like my YouTube like watch time, some especially like when, I don't know, I'm gonna skip ahead here, but like especially when like 2020 rolled around and I was like at home all the time with my kids and stuff, like, oh my God, like, because I always have earphones in, so I just like put on a video and just listen to it. Like
Yep.
yeah, so that's all I did for a really long time. But before that, prior to 2019, because I will say like 2019 is the year that I just said I'm leaving the left. I can't be here anymore. I can't go along with like anything that you're saying anymore. But before that, it was really just taking the time to go and listen to other perspectives, debates, viewpoints, lectures, a lot of that, and just sit there and just think about what I believed in, what they were saying. I looked up, I looked up a lot of things, just whatever video I would come across, whatever the topic was. If I wanted to learn any more about it, I would go and like pull up statistics and facts and try to look into historical context. And I just did that over and over and over. And then I started seeing everything. I started seeing all the hypocrisy amongst leftist ideologies. And it's like there's a lot of little pockets of ideologies within this broad kind of scope, and they butt heads constantly. And it's very interesting to me because it's almost like, I don't know, like eating their own type of mindset. But I started seeing all that, and I started just seeing how distorted the media was portraying things, like to such a vast degree that it's like yellow journalism now. It's all sensationalized. None of it is based on like, instead of informing you and letting you form your own opinion, they are telling you what to think a lot of the time. And that happens on both sides of the aisle. I'm not going to deny that. I actually I try really hard to what's CNN saying? What's Fox News saying? What are the independents saying? And go from there. And I read a lot of news, online, not online reporting, but just reporting when it's not an anchor or like a political pundit. I think that's a trap a lot of people fall into. They think these political pundits are journalists. They are not. They're talking heads. They're there to tell you what to think. Whereas like there's now, sorry, I'm getting into I'm rambling, but a lot of journalists now are also doing very unethical things. They're publishing stories without getting both sides. They're messaging people 2 hours before they publish the content and saying, hey, do you have an opinion on this? Do you have do you want to provide your comment on this? It's like 2 hours before. You really expect somebody to actually receive that and be able to respond with enough time. And they do a lot of really sneaky things like that. Emailing an email address from somebody who hasn't used that email in years. It's like an old email, and they think, oh, well, look, I tried reaching out to you. You didn't comment. Oh, well. And there's a lot of that kind of stuff going, a lot of like taking clips and just showing them in this tiny little subtext, and not putting any of the context with it. That can be really dangerous. Like you can find a video from almost anyone and cut, 15 seconds of them saying something, and without the rest of their sentence or their thought, it could make that person look really, really bad, really, really fast. And people do that all the time. And I never fall for that. I always say, okay, I need to actually go and find the actual clip. I need to see what this was in the full context. And that's what happened with Trump over and over and over and over. And I'm pretty neutral on Trump. I don't love him. I don't hate him. And, that's like, there's a cult following for Trump in and of itself, but it's a
Oh,
very small
yes,
group of
yes.
people, in my opinion. Most people just,
And
they think he did a
several
good job,
Mormons involved in that.
Yeah, and most people just are oh, I'm sure. But like,
Yeah.
most people just think he did a good job as president and that's it. Like I'd vote
Mhm.
for him again if I would. That's the mindset of a lot of people, just because the country was doing well under him economically and all of these things. Um, Especially foreign
So,
policy too. But
with the
anyway,
journalism thing,
yeah. So
oh, I just wanted
mhm,
to add to that. I think the sad thing is, as a society, we incentivize bad reporting, like not, honest reporting because that's what makes money. Scary, big,
mhm.
crazy titles is what makes money. And I mean, as far like, I think that's been the case in the past as well. But I think now it's worse potentially. Now I haven't looked into it a ton, but it's definitely a problem. Um,
It's
I
worse.
wanted to
Yeah, it's
say
really bad right now.
yeah, well, and I know in the past that there's examples of it too, as far as like dishonest journalism, but I do think that the scary thing now is with the internet, with being able to doctor videos and photos and things, and like it just the capacity for for evil has expanded, the capacity for dishonesty. Okay, so I want to ask you about 2019 when you kind of had that like I don't feel like I belong in the left anymore. In your I left the left video, you mentioned, feeling kind of politically homeless. Tell me how you felt. Was that lonely? Was that scary? Like, what was that like for you feeling wise?
I can't exactly tell you when in 2019 it happened. It was before I got married, because that's the year I got married. And it was, I would say, probably like early, like winter, spring-ish. But I had reached this point where so many of my views had just shifted and changed, and I felt like I couldn't talk to anybody about it besides like my husband, then fiance at the time. It's funny too. The place I worked was actually full of like conservative people or ex cops or ex military guys. And the one of my friends that I worked with, him and I would constantly talk about stuff. And he was more conservative and religious, but he was very open minded and he was very kind. And I would just kind of ramble and go off and spew a bunch of crap and yell about about all the things. And he would just sit and listen, and he would kind of provide his perspective. But he let me kind of just say what I wanted to say and just didn't, okay, well, that's cool. Like, whatever you want to think. Like, I respect you, and um, that's very interesting. But yeah, like, I got to this point where I was like, okay, well, I've ran my mouth a whole lot, and I didn't do it online. I did it in person with people. Like, I didn't like go online and like, I wasn't on TikTok. I wasn't on YouTube. I wasn't using any of these social media platforms. I was using like Facebook, and I would get into like wars on Facebook with people I knew, or I would talk to people I knew in person. And when you do that, when you realize that all of your viewpoints, or a lot of your viewpoints, I won't say all, but a lot of your viewpoints have changed, it gets like almost embarrassing. Like, you feel very like, oh my God, like all these people have heard me say all of these things. And now I think in a completely different way. And I don't know how to communicate that. And then there's an element of, you don't want anybody to know that you've changed your mind, because if they're on the left, they'll label you as a horrible, hateful, you've been brainwashed, you've been manipulated, you fell for all the propaganda. Meanwhile, they're like eating it up. And so I didn't feel like I could speak to anybody in person. I tried a little bit, but
I was gonna say that's so similar to Mormonism. That whole like, when you leave a religion, you don't want to talk about it because you don't want the Mormons to hate you, and you don't want the ex-Mormons to judge you, and like, and people literally they buy these shirts that say "I'm sorry for what I said when I was Mormon." Like it's a very so there's so many parallels, So continue what you're saying.
yeah. So and it was like it was a very isolating feeling, that's for sure. And I also just, I was going through this period, like I had stopped, sometime before I was like, okay, I'm done. I had kind of stopped posting anything political on my social medias. And I was the annoying leftist that would just post meme after meme after meme, and I would just constantly spew all of my political rantings, and for all the people who knew me to see and stuff like that. Like, people told me like they had to like unfriend me, block me, like, because I just got so annoying. And and like that's interesting too, is like, instead of pushing back ever, they were just like, I'm just gonna step out. Like, and yeah, and that's a really interesting concept too to me. It's like, geez, like, the most combative people, I feel like, are very far left, but
Mhm.
it, in doing this, I just became quiet. I just when I realized my views were shifting, I just got quiet, and I just started listening, and I didn't want to I don't know, say something, and then like the next week, like, be like, oh, maybe that wasn't right. Like, and I got into a weird thing too, where I started deleting old posts, because I was getting embarrassed of seeing what I was saying, which I really regret now, because like there was some gold in there, I'm sure. But I found some older posts, and especially like I found posts from like the night Trump got elected, and I was like, oh my god, like it's very cringy. I want to react to it, but it's like it's rough. So so yeah, and when I finally, like, I think the final big straw was like my pro-choice views, and leaving that and going pro-life. And I had done a lot of research around that, and a lot of listening, and I just realized that, like, I felt like I was on the wrong side of that issue. I felt like I wasn't looking at this from like a humanity standpoint.
So any other feelings you were experiencing as you're kind of like politically homeless and, trying to navigate, like, what do I think now? What do I believe now? Like, what makes me a good person now?
I went through that. I've gone through that many times, honestly. Like, I constantly reassess, just to make sure that I'm not going off the rails again. But I felt like I had to be silent. I had to be quiet. There was a lot of people that I knew there's a lot of people who I know and I'm friends with and stuff like that that are liberal. My closest friends they're not really political, thankfully. So it doesn't really matter for them. But I felt like I just couldn't speak publicly about anything. I felt like I couldn't chance anything, because I had seen people get just wrecked when they had like kind of pushed back or spoke out, or the horrible things that they're called. And I was just so afraid of that happening to me, because when you're not a bad person, and then you see a bunch of people calling other people who think similarly to you or have similar stances on things, when you see them getting like just vilified and attacked and all of that stuff, it's like, like, I don't want that to happen to me. So it
Yeah.
was really hard to come to terms with that. But then I got married, and then we immediately got pregnant. So then I had like a whole different part of my life forming, right? And I had said, okay, I'm leaving the left. I'm done with this. And I didn't know where I stood, but I kept going, man, I'm aligning with conservatives on like almost like on so many different things. It's really the religion part that I'm not into. Although I do
Right,
see
right.
merits in it when it's used correctly. But I mean, I'm sure, as you know, there's a lot of instances where it's not used correctly and not utilized to the benefit of people, but rather hinder them and hurt them.
Right,
So,
right.
but anyway, I kept in my head going, I'm not conservative, but I align with them. I'm not conservative though. I'm not. Nope. No chance. Like, and I was very
Okay, wait,
resistant. I was
can I
very
just like
resistant.
it's like Mormons when they're on the cusp, and they're like, I believe the church is true. It just like it's not perfect. Like there's just like there's some issues with it or whatever. And it's so funny. I love it. I love it. Keep going.
Yeah, and that was a really weird one too to come to terms with. And I did that for probably about a year, I would say. This whole like, and I would sit there and question, I'm like, am I one of them? Like, am I like conservative now? Like, what is happening? But I would never say it out loud. And I just kept saying, like, no, like, I'm just, have similar mindsets, similar views, and stuff like that.
So did it
Um,
scare you
and
to think that you might be conservative? Like, why? Why was that so scary? Like, was that side vilified so much, like, when you were on the left that it was like, "This is evil," or something, or what was that?
so when I'm going to talk about just how I viewed conservatives. The
Yes,
way I viewed
yes.
conservatives as a leftist, I thought they were all horrible, hateful people who didn't have any compassion for anyone, didn't want people to do well in life, which is like that's just it's I had a very condescending, like I just thought they were just stupid. Like, oh, you're just look at you, like you're just a dumb conservative and you don't know anything. And it was a really negative way to view like an entire group of people, that's for damn sure. And so
Right, right. Well, and
I
that
was
is
so
so similar as far as, like, religious context, again, to just draw that parallel for people. It's that us versus them mentality, and that us
mhm.
versus them mentality is so cult-like at its core, right? Okay, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, and so it was just because of my own connotations, my own negative connotations of conservatism in general, that I was so resistant to ever calling myself conservative. And then I started just like looking into like, okay, what are the principles? Sir, like, why are people? What makes you conservative? You know? And
Right,
I started just kind of thinking about that. And the more that I did that, and the more my views were still shifting, and they're still shifting. And I don't ever want to say like, oh, I've come to such a solid place. There's some areas where I have come to a very solid place in, but there's other areas where I'm
right,
like,
right.
if you present a good enough argument, I would consider it, you know? And I think that's
And
really
that's how it
important
should
too.
be. That's how it should be for
Mhm.
everybody, about everything, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then like once 2020 rolled around, and I had twins, and I had them extremely premature. And so when all the like lockdowns went into place, I was already in my own lockdown. Like I was already
Mm.
I had gone off work. I was on bed rest. I had been in the hospital for a week. And so like when all of that hit, I was already like, oh well, I'm glad that I haven't been around everybody. But I started just seeing what was happening, and all of the measures that were being put into place that didn't make any sense, and people just going along with it. And I was also terrified because I had two premature babies. I was absolutely
Yeah.
terrified. And it
Oh,
makes
of
me
them
really,
getting sick, right?
yeah, yeah, because like I mean if they
Yeah,
would have caught anything, like if they would have caught the flu or a cold, like they had no immune
yeah,
systems, right? So
yeah.
and they're in NICU and they're fighting for their life every single day. And we had a couple of weird scares here and there that did get really scary, but and I also was terrified of getting sick myself because I wouldn't know how long it would be until I
Yeah,
could see them. Like, and so a lot of these things, it's all compounding, right?
totally,
And then I
totally.
like, you know, so I did all the things. Like I social distance and I wore my mask, and I was really afraid all of the time because of all of these things again that the media were pumping into our brains and saying over and over. And I'm going to give everybody, you know, the slack here is because nobody knew what was happening in the beginning. Nobody knew what was going on. Nobody knew the
Everyone was
outcomes of
scared.
all of these
Yeah.
things. Yeah. And so like I was told like, yeah, 2 weeks to slow the spread. Totally get it. But then it turned into a month, and then two, and then three for a lot of areas. And then it just kept going. And there's all of these weird implementations. And it was seeing all of that and seeing how quickly people would fall in line for some a perceived threat of some kind that really I was like,
Oh.
whoa. Like, and in a lot of ways it was like a weird test that was done, not on like I don't say it's on purpose or
Like
anything
a
like that, but
social experiment. Right, right.
yeah. And that's what worried me too, is because people are still very staunchly sticking to things that just don't make any sense anymore. Like we know a lot
Mhm.
more now than we did you know, 2.5 years ago. And it's very that part was just very telling to me. And it was somewhere in that year before the election that I was like, okay, I'm conservative because I see how quickly people fall for they think the government is their friend. They think that it's going to make the best decisions for them. And I had a big problem with that. It's like, no, I make the best decisions for me because you don't know me and you don't know what's best for me. And I don't think we can apply, like apply this to everybody in this way and ruin the economy and ruin businesses and all of this stuff. Right. So anyway, going forward, the election happened and I went in and I voted for Trump in 2020. And I did so, and it felt weird. Like it felt strange, and it felt like this weird, like, wow, like I really just I voted Republican for the first time in my life, which granted I hadn't voted a whole lot, but it was a very surreal experience, and I felt
kind
like
of like
I didn't
a
feel bad
landmark
about it.
moment. Right.
Yeah, and it was just, like I said, so real. It was just very strange for me. And I left feeling good. And I was like, okay, like I voted for Trump. Did it. Boom. Like, ha. And then, and then a lot of more things happened politically, and a lot of like the mandates and the attempted mandates and all that kind of stuff. And it just really like solidified, like, yep, that's why I voted that way, because I didn't want all of these things to happen. And then in what year is it right now? 2022. So sorry, it's always hard working backwards. Yeah, because I always feel like I sometimes I remember things like out of order too. Like I'll be like, when did that happen?
Yeah.
Oh no, I switched so
we all do that. Totally.
Yeah. So anyway, so 2022 rolls around, right? And I had been a stay-at-home mom for 2 years at that point. I was freelancing, but I felt really alone and I felt isolated, and I had really like come to terms with being conservative, which is like weird. That it's such a big deal, but I'd come to terms with everything, and I was like, okay, I know what I believe in. I know where my foundations lie, and I just want somebody to talk to about this, because my husband and I, we disagree on some things still, or we see things from slightly different perspectives. Obviously he's a man and I'm a woman, so we have that kind of just natural balance there. And when I first got onto TikTok in like the summer of like 2021, I was just watching, and I just watched, there's a bunch of people doing a bunch of fun things and stupid videos and people trying to go viral all the time and all of that. But then there was a shift that happened in my For You page, and politics started coming up and social issues, and people who were conservative started speaking out, and more people that I saw started making videos. And then all of a sudden they would be like, hey, guess what? I'm conservative. And that like kind of sparked something in me. And I said, maybe this can be a place where I can go and just talk about what I want to talk about and share what I think and share my perspectives. And at the time, and I think honestly, you can see the shift just in my content on TikTok. Like if you go all the way freaking back, I was a much more like, I wouldn't say insecure, but I was just really like treading carefully. And I was very nervous.
Towing the line.
I was very, very nervous. Yeah. And I was very scared. And the first video I ever posted was just like a song and like text on a screen. And it was just like, hey, I'm a former leftist and now I'm conservative. Hi, basically. Like, nice to meet you.
And I say it with a passion as I pull off in the Aston. Don't nobody like his ass, huh? Tried to cover up and tell the people, go Brandon. But we know what they saying, though.
And that like got a whole bunch of views and stuff. And so I had somebody ask like, well, why? Why did you like change your mind? And then I just answered that in like a 3-minute video where I'm just going on and on and on. And I'm blabbering. And I think I said like 8,000 times, and it really bothers me still. But
well, good morning, TikTok. I've gotten a couple of comments like this, kind of asking for my story. It's a long one, but let me try to sum it up really quickly.
That video blew up, and that video took off. And all of a sudden, I had thousands of people streaming in and following me and commenting and asking me questions and asking me like, and it was like I think I went from like a couple hundred followers to like 10,000 in a week over there. And to some people that might not seem like a whole lot, but it was very overwhelming for me. Like I didn't know what was happening. Like I was like, why? Like, like, and
Right.
yeah. So then I like started talking about stuff, and I started like a lot of my content was literally just replying to people. It was just people asking me questions, replying, like, and I kind of started just having all these like weird types of conversations, I guess, because it's not really a conversation, but and sharing my views and sharing what I thought and conversing with people. And I got all this support. And then I was just in this completely other place where I was like, oh my God, like I'm not alone. And people actually, because I had a lot of people saying, I feel the same way you do, or I was also on the left and I had to leave. And even if they're not conservative or whatever, there's a lot of libertarians, a lot of independents, and basically anybody who's not woke is labeled alt-right anyway. So it doesn't really matter at this point.
Oh God.
But it changed something for me, and it gave me a place for me to say what I think and be myself. And as I said, I was so nervous in the beginning because I knew it was coming. I knew you're just a bigot, you're just a racist, you're just this, you're just that, you're homophobic, you're transphobic. Like I knew all of that was coming.
Right.
And I was like bracing myself for it, but I wasn't ready for it when it did like kick off. Because I've always actually had, funnily enough, I've had a really hard time with criticism for most of my life and dealing with people not liking me. Like there's been a lot of people in my life who haven't liked me, or like, have left my life in some shape or form, even if they were family, like kind of, so it's hard for me sometimes when people just don't like me. And it's been a really great learning tool, actually, is learning how to deal with that and learning how to take really harsh criticism, or just learning how to take people being mean to you to be mean to you. Like it's you learn how to compartmentalize and not take things personally, and understand like this person is just saying the worst things that they can think of, because that's what, like, that's a reflection of them rather than me. But then, like, and I got a lot of people, like, I remember like people would stitch some of my videos and I like couldn't watch them because I was so scared. Like I would like shake. Like I was like, I just don't want to hear being mean. Like I can't handle you being mean to me. And it's interesting to me now, because now I'll just watch stuff like that and be like, oh, well, you're making assumptions here, or you're doing this, or you're doing that. But at the time I was still just in this space of like, I actually have like a lot of anxiety, and like I have like a anxiety disorder. So it's like, it was learning how to deal with that and learning how to just let that just roll off me and not really care, and just think like they're going to think what they think. And there's nothing I can do to change that anyway, because I would kind of go back and forth with people too.
I just love so much these things that you're saying. I relate so much to your story because, I left Mormonism, started the YouTube stuff because I was lonely, because I was confused, because I was scared. I was looking for community. I was like, someone else out there has to feel this way. And as I started putting thoughts out there, it started getting traction, right? And there was this like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like, I'm not the only one that thinks this way. And then here comes all the hate, right? Of people that saying the hateful Mormon things of wickedness never was happiness, all this stuff. And it really can shake you to your core, to your very core, because the comments that hurt you the most are the ones that revolve around where you were wounded the deepest, right? And so I love your perspective on treating it as an opportunity to grow as a person, as opposed to, I mean, what else would you do? I guess just ignore it or shrink or lash out, right? So I just love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, keep going. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, and it is a interesting exercise too in learning how to evaluate what somebody's saying and say, okay, is there merit in this criticism? Or are they just lashing out at me? Why is it bothering me? If a comment like actually gets under my skin and it bothers, like if I find myself thinking about it, like after I see it for any length of time, I'm like, okay, like why is this bugging me right now? And a lot of times, it could be something within myself, within like, if I feel like I'm lacking in a certain area and somebody's like saying something, you know, pointing that out in some way, or being really over the top with it usually. Cause I'm very self-critical of me anyway. And I'm constantly like, I don't know enough. I don't know. I get hit with imposter syndrome a lot, in the sense of like,
Yes.
I know that I am fairly intelligent, and I know that I am trying to be as critical as I can and objective as I can. And I know that I have my own biases, right? And I try to constantly analyze all of that, but it can be like really detrimental to constantly do that, because you end up just picking yourself
Right.
apart so much that it's hard to like, you know, kind of
It's
get
exhausting.
just,
It's exhausting. And also,
yeah.
like, you end up kinda gaslighting yourself, like, of like, "Okay, well, everyone is saying this, so it must be true." Like, it's a psychological phenomenon that's really hard to fight against. So, I think it's incredible that you're on this journey and that you're doing this and that you've come so far. It's so cool to hear you talk about how you were shaking, you were so afraid, and now you're like, "Okay, you know, here we go," right? And I love that. I admire that a lot because I also see that reflective in my journey. I used to not read comments because I was so afraid. I was so afraid, right? And so
Mhm.
it's cool in my own life to see like how far I've come too, and to also know like that there's so much further to go. And I feel like encouraged by how far you've gotten, if that makes sense. So tell
I
me
appreciate
what,
that.
yeah. So tell me, as far as like posting all this stuff that you're posting, what do you hope to come from all of this? Like, what's your kind of your goal? And it may have shifted from where it started. Like, what right now do you feel like? Why do you do it?
And I think definitely when I started, it was just, I just wanted a place. I just wanted a space where I could just say what I think, you know? And over on TikTok, you know, that has provided me with a lot. Like, as bad as TikTok can be, it really gave me a voice and a way to speak my mind, and it's driven me to improve, because I'll watch old videos and I'm just like, "Oh my god, like you suck."
Right.
Like but
Right,
you know,
right.
and I came over to YouTube in August, actually, and I did so at the urging of other people. And I was really nervous about it, and I was like, "Man, I don't know how to do long form content." It's really easy to make a TikTok or a YouTube short, or you know, you
Mhm.
pick your camera up, you have 60 seconds, and you have to condense whatever your thoughts are in such a precise way, which can be to the detriment of yourself too, because you just can't fit enough into it. So people will just take little bits and pieces and kind of distort it themselves. But you know, long form content is a lot different, and there's a lot more involved. It's a lot more time consuming and all of that. So I was just really nervous about it. And I started with just, you know, like, I left the left. Here you go. This is why. And uh you know, my channel is really blown up, and it's been very surprising and overwhelming all over again. And it's a lot harsher here, that's for sure. People are a lot harsher over in the comments on YouTube.
Oh
But
my gosh.
I I think my goal ultimately is, I want to just be able to provide a different perspective that is more of also a middle ground between two extremes. And I say that in a sense of, because I'm not religious, there's a lot of conservatives who, there's a lot, I get a lot of support from conservatives. I'm not knocking every conservative, right? But there's some conservatives who
Right.
do not like me. They don't like my hair, they don't like my piercings, they think I look like one of them. And yeah.
I
And
get it.
it can be
I
frustrating
get it.
sometimes. And also I actually just recently I got into like an argument with a bunch of like religious people over on
Mhm.
Twitter, and that was interesting. And sometimes I think people forget that, like, I have a different perspective, and I have this, like, I don't know, I'm like a hybrid. I always feel like I'm a hybrid, and it's frustrating because it's like there's some conservatives who will sit there and say you're not conservative, and I'm like, I literally don't care what you say. I am, in most of my values, I am conservative. It's the best label I can give myself that communicates what I think in the quickest way, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And sorry, you asked my ultimate goal, and I'm going off into these tangents, but I want to be a place where people from both sides of the aisle can come and perhaps get their own perspective challenged, and just understand that you don't have to be all in on anything. And I don't think that's healthy either. I
Yes.
don't think it's healthy to completely align yourself and mold yourself into whatever ideology that you. I think it's really important to say, okay, liberal, conservative, I align more with conservatives. I align on these, and these. I differ on this. It doesn't mean I'm not
Yes.
conservative. It
Yes.
means that I just have an area where we differ, or we could differ in just our perspectives. It's just from a little bit different. Or like there's generational components to this as well, where much older conservatives are a lot different than like millennial conservatives. You know, we just grew up in a different time
Yes.
with different ideas around us and a different normal, as you will say. But and that's the interesting part too, is like now, because I'm 30. A lot of people think I'm like 24 or something, but I'm 30, and I see the Gen Z people, and I'm like, you crazy kids, like, like that mindset. So I would like to be able to provide people with just this new view. I want to do a lot of like more informative videos, like deep dives. I just like have to. It's a lot of time involved with that, and I'm doing a lot of research currently for many different things. But I would like to be able to provide more historical context, and like, did you know the history of this? Did you know the history of this figure? Did you know the history of this organization that everybody upholds and supports and stuff like that? And just be that place that's almost like more middle ground. Like, obviously I'm right leaning or whatever, but like when I really break it down, I feel like I'm conservative in my values, and I'm a right leaning libertarian in a lot of different ways, with like in policy and just like I want people to be able to live their lives, right? But also you can't encroach on other people living their lives. Like everybody has different views, everybody has different backgrounds and stuff like that. But there are some core tenets that I feel like they don't even have a voice anymore. Like the idea of family has just like disintegrated within our society. And so I just want to give a voice in a new way to some of these things that I do think are important that people can at least consider. And I'm sorry for such a long-winded answer, geez, but I think
you
there's
don't
just
have to apologize. You don't have to apologize. I loved your answer. I love that you're a hybrid. I love that you have this like dual perspective, you know, and like it is so valuable, you know, and it helps to have, you know, more fair criticisms when you've seen it from both sides. It really does. It makes a difference. And I also love how you pointed out that idea that like it doesn't have to be so black and white, like you're all conservative or you're all liberal. And you know what's funny about that too is I read Coddling the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt. I don't know if you've read that, but in that book he talks about the polarization that's happened with politics, where one opinion on a certain ideal didn't necessarily in the 70s wasn't quite as accurate at guessing the rest of your political opinions like it is right now. And that's like crazy to think about. And I think it's social media that's polarized us like that. But I digress. You mentioned watching your old videos and it being cringy, right? And I feel that way too, you know, as a YouTuber and everything. But I had a friend on my channel the other day that said something really cool. And it's that looking back, if you think it's cringy, that's because you've grown. So like, don't be so hard on yourself, like be proud of yourself that you've grown. Right. And I love that perspective. And similarly to what you said, you mentioned before this video that I think that you had deleted some of your old posts and tweets and things from when you were on the left, and how you kind of regret that. And my husband had a similar experience because he had written a lot of things, really cheesy Mormon things and stuff, like in his journals and stuff. And he like threw them away. And now he's like, it was really arrogant of me as like 21-year-old Jared to assume that like 30-year-old Jared wouldn't want that, you know? And I just thought that was really interesting. Anyway, you got my mind on that tangent. Lastly, that whole like just free yourself up to think about topics individually and to explore them on an individual basis instead of like you've got to be all in on everything, because I think that's the most authentic way to do it. And I think that, you know, for those of us who've left a high demand religion, we are we want someone to hand us like a framework to view the world again. We want someone to just be like, here's all the things you got to do to be a good person. And the scary thing is there's a lot of people out there who are going to tell you, here's what you have to do, and they're wrong. And that's scary, right? But you'd rather them be wrong than you be wrong when you come up with it like on your own or whatever. And that's why you have to have the courage to be wrong, because the minute you have that courage to be wrong, that's when you start listening and you start learning a lot more than you were before, and you give yourself that space to breathe. Anyway, those were just some thoughts I have.
That's a wonderful way to put it too. The internet has created this environment in which people are so afraid to be wrong, they won't ever question if they are. Like, they want to prove that they are right at all times, and they will just blatantly cling to, I'm right because I think I'm right. And it's a fear of embarrassment. It's like a public humiliation factor, because when you've got a bunch of people saying that you're wrong, there's an element of public humiliation in that. And if you get thousands and thousands of views on something and you're like, oh crap, like, but at some point you have to just cut ties with that element of like, no, it's not humiliation. It shows that, if I'm willing to be wrong and correct my thoughts or my opinions, or perhaps even like center yourself a little bit more, like, there's been a lot of times where I'm like, am I too far right? Like, am I going on a crazy, like snowball effect the other way?
Because you have to ask yourself, right.
Mm-hmm. And, there's a lot of things that like, I do make a distinction between like leftists and liberals. Those are very different, because leftists are leading the pack and liberals are just either staying silent or going along with it in a lot of different ways. And so, like, people are just really, they're afraid to be wrong. And I think it's important to humble yourself and to realize that if you think you have all the answers, you probably don't. Point blank period.
Yes. Those are the wisest people, right? Right. I think so. And okay, you know what I love about this? It's so scary to be wrong. It is terrifying to us. And you said one aspect of it is humiliation, right? But I think it's less the fear of being humiliated by other people and more the fear of like people seeing us for the incompetent weirdos that we really are afraid that we are, right? And so I think we're less afraid of what other people think of us, and we're more afraid of recognizing how stupid or awkward or weird we are, and we're scared to confront that because that shame is so heavy. It's really scary to confront. So I think people shield themselves from that shame by, like you said, I'm just right about everything. And like it will close them off to rationality, like to just objective rationality, because it is a self-defensive mechanism of I'm trying to protect myself from this pain of like what it would feel like if I was wrong, and especially wrong in front of like all these people, right? So yeah.
I think a lot of it also is ego driven. Like, there's a lot of people who are just letting their egos get in the way of actually thinking about something for longer than 5 minutes. And there's a lot of like, cause I do try to go watch a lot of different types of content, and I watch a lot more people like me also, who are just kind of hybrids, who came from the left and are now conservative, or came from the left and are libertarian, and kind of sit on these weird middle grounds of like, okay, well, I see merit in this point, but I see merit in this point. Which do I think would provide better solutions? And at this point, people are naturally tribalistic, right? Like we like our communities, we like our groups, we like our little tribes of people that we align with. But you cannot close yourself off to everything else or every other idea and just deem it as you're just hateful because you're saying something that I don't agree with. That doesn't equate to hate. There's Zuby, actually. I don't know if you watch him or know about him. Over on Twitter, he made a post, and it was like, you should check him out. He's great. But he made a post, and it was like, oh God, what was it? It was people are too quick to think that disagreement equals hate. And I started thinking about that, and I was like, there's also an element of, it's not actually hateful to disapprove of something someone said, or perhaps even their lifestyle in general. Like, I cannot like your lifestyle, or disapprove in a sense of your lifestyle, but that doesn't mean I hate you. It just means that,
Right.
I wouldn't live that way. Or perhaps I don't think that's the better way to live your life, or what have you. And that applies to all kinds of different lifestyles, right? It's like we all have what we think is best, or perhaps what we're telling ourselves is best. And
Yeah.
I think it's really important to just bring that back and be like, not everybody hates you just because they don't like what you're saying, or they disagree with your viewpoint. And
Yes.
that's the
Yes.
problem. Like, that's the biggest problem on the left right now, is anything, any type of disagreement on even the smallest little bit. Like, you could even just disagree in part with something somebody said, and that then you're just labeled as this hateful, horrible, bigoted ist of some kind. And it's just
Yeah.
a way to shut you down. It's a thought stopping technique, in my opinion, because when you're unwilling to have the conversation, you just put up that door of, nope, you're hateful, I'm blocking you out, instead of
Right.
actually trying to
Right.
give merit to this other person. Because when you give merit to an opposing viewpoint, there's a risk that you have to challenge your own. And I think that's where
Yes.
people get really, really hung up on that, challenging your own views, challenging your own opinions, making sure that you're actually right about something that
Yeah.
you may have held on to for a long time. And I think, like, that's the problem with, like, these cult mentalities. And I've been through the bite model. I love the bite model.
Yeah.
And I've gone through and I've picked out, and there's another model that goes along with the bite model as well, that I've delved into. I can't remember the name of it right offhand though, but and man, like, there's so many things that just hit all of those boxes, and they check all those points. And obviously that's not a way to actually define a cult by any means. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
the most common tactics of control that people use, right? And that's what it comes down to, is that authoritarianism. And I don't like that on either side. And I've seen
Yeah.
how it could, like, I've delved into some spheres of very, very religious people. And I've met a lot of really great religious people. And I'm going to say that right off the bat. I've met people that I can
Of
talk
course.
to, that are open, that are willing, that, because I've been, like, I've moved from atheism into being agnostic, because I feel like when I was a militant atheist, I acted almost the same way a fundamentalist religious person would, in the sense that I thought I had all the answers. I was arrogant. I was condescending. I looked down upon anybody who was religious. I was very hostile towards religious people. And it's the exact same way that very, very staunchly, like, fundamentalists act towards everybody else, in my opinion. It's just opposite. Like, it's so crazy that people aren't seeing that the very far ends of the spectrum operate in a very, very similar way, even if they have completely opposing viewpoints. The
Yes.
tactics end up
Yes.
being the same.
Which brings me back to my favorite quote after leaving Mormonism, which was that everything is a cult. And I think if we can look at the world through that lens, we might be a lot more critical about things that we should be critical of. Okay, I love the us versus them thing. That is such a big part of why I think society is so polarized, and why people can't be friends across the political spectrum anymore. Because I think that there's this safety in, like, people agreeing with me. And I think it's the same with religions, right? That us versus them is like, I can't hang out with this person because they might challenge me, right? They might disagree with me. That might make me feel bad. They might judge me. There's all that. But it's like, yeah, we don't want to feel threatened by that other side. So if someone has a different idea, we're just, oh, I don't want that person in my life, or I'm not going to listen to that person anymore. Like, I noticed that I still sometimes I still struggle with that. Like, I find there's funny people on TikTok that I'll follow, and then they'll be like something politically that I disagree with, and I'm like, oh, I can't watch them. And I'm like, no, wait a second. I love their videos. Like, we don't have to agree about everything. Like, I'm safe, and they can think that, I can think this, like, and we can both change our minds. Like, and I'm trying to get myself to open my brain up to that more, because coming out of a religion, that black and white, like right and wrong, us versus them, is so innately ingrained. that it's not something that we can just like slip out of. Like it's something you have to fight your way out of. And I think the way you fight your way out of it is through being compassionate for anyone with any opinion, and understanding that the reason that they have the opinions that they do are simply because of the experiences and the education that they've received. So yeah, that's kind of how I try to be more open-minded as far as accepting people regardless of opinions.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And I've caught myself doing that as well. I've caught myself being like, oh, like, and I just, it's funny to me too, because I just have such a different mindset. And I do try sometimes to like put myself back into the leftist shoes and just think about that and who I used to be. And because people can just get so nasty when they're behind a keyboard. And I try really hard to like remember who I was. And it's like, I had good intentions. I thought I was right, but I just viewed people in such a bad light. And there's been a time or two where I've done a little clap back and been like, because I do get tired. It gets very exhausting constantly being told how, like, you're this and you're that and you're that. And it's just like, bro, like, no, I am not. Calm down. Like, and so I do try really hard to just keep that in mind and remember, like, I wasn't a bad person, so it doesn't necessarily mean they are. They're just being very hostile. I also think like people are just very hostile at this point. They're so divided. And I think honestly, I think the left is creating the monster that they keep blaming the right of, in the sense that they have pushed, it's gone so far, and they keep pushing forward, and they keep pushing and being more extreme with everything. And they're creating this they're going to create a pendulum swing, in a sense, where all of these people who have conglomerated, and like, especially everybody who's leaving the left and going, more right wing, or just being done with the left in general. People over there, I'm watching it happen. I'm watching people who were, pretty conservative. They're going farther, and they're getting more like, no, I have to draw this line. I have to put up this barrier because you're going too far. And it's going to, at some point, it's going to swing the other way, and we have to stop it from getting too far to the right. You know what I mean? Like, there has to be middle ground. We have to be more center. And I think that's a really, like, I get frustrated sometimes, even with like, I love all the people who watch me and support me, for sure. But sometimes they also forget where I came from, and that I'm a bit more, I just have different viewpoints, you know what I mean? And I wish that people kind of kept that in mind, because sometimes I get a little bit nervous about like posting a certain type of video or something, just because I'm like, oh, this is gonna piss off the right, or like, and it's not necessarily that I worry about that. I just want people to center themselves and just understand that, not everybody's like has lost their mind, and it is really funny too, because like the purple hair at the piercings, like that throws people off a lot. Like they'll run across one of my videos, and I get all these comments all the time, like, oh, I thought you were just going to say a bunch of crazy stuff, and like, you're based, like, what's happening here? It makes me laugh. It's like, bro, like, my hair doesn't have anything to do with what's in my head. And I've had my piercings for like 15 years. I've had my piercings like half my life at this point. So like, they haven't gone anywhere. And that's an interesting part too, is like, people constantly say like, I'm brainwashed, but now I'm brainwashed on the right. And it's like, don't you think I would have like not dyed my hair and like taken my piercings out and made sure I looked like a perfect little conservative poster child if I wanted to be accepted by every single person on the right? And I do try to, like, it's funny because I used to be so hostile towards religion that I'm much more respectful of that now. And I try very hard to be respectful, but I still have my grievances with certain things, right? Like, I actually had a bunch of very religious people tell me that because I'm not religious, because I'm an atheist or agnostic or whatever, that my marriage shouldn't be called marriage. It should be called a civil union. And I was like, bro, like people literally were saying, well, I don't know why any atheist would ever want to get married, because that's not what marriage is. And, you're just doing it for tax benefits. And I'm like, no, I'm married because I love my husband and I want to create a solid family unit and I want to provide structure to my family. Like, our goals are the same here. I just don't have God within my marriage. You know what I mean? Like, and people have that
Marriage
disconnect of
doesn't
like,
count unless Jesus is watching you have sex,
it's
I
very,
guess.
yeah, it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating because I was just like, what? And like I like went to like all my platforms and I was like, is this like a common thing or is this a fringe group? And most people were like, well, it's kind of, yeah, it's pretty much a fringe group. I got some like mixed, but most people are like, yeah, I've never
Yeah.
heard anybody think that because you're not religious, it shouldn't be called marriage. And I found it silly, it's like a handful of people overall, but I just found it so silly. And I was just like, this is weird. Like, so it's like those types of things, like I'm going, and I think, because I'm a conservative content creator for the most part, people assume perhaps that I wouldn't ever push back against anybody on the right, when it's like I'm going to push back against ideas that I don't agree with or I don't think are particularly good, or like it doesn't matter what you are. Like I would hope that all of us can come together and do that within our own groups as well, because that's the problem with a lot of people on the left. They're unwilling to acknowledge the grievances within their own like conflicting ideologies and beliefs and stuff like that, because that was a big thing too, is like I would look at things so individually that I would forget to like pan out and connect all the ideas together and see like the entire picture. And I think that's really important. Like when you're going through your beliefs, it is important to like look at them on an individual basis and figure it, because it takes time, right? You can't just do it overnight. So it's really important to like kind of go through that individually and figure out where you stand on everything and reevaluate. But then you have to pan out and you have to zoom out and go, does all of this make sense when I put it together? Am I being hypocritical in any way? And am I being, like holding like two conflicting beliefs that might create cognitive dissonance within myself? And I think that's a big problem, is people aren't doing that on the left. Whereas like most people on the right do, I've noticed, try very, very hard to make sure they're consistent with their beliefs. And there's going to be some hypocrisies. There's going to be some contradictions, within certain groups of people. But I also have known a lot of like more like conservatives who are like constitutional conservatives. They're not necessarily like, they might be religious, but that's not that. Those are different groups of people. Like people who are just religious and they're constitutional conservatives and they're more just like socially conservative are a very different kind of person from like fundamentalists, religion type of people. Because like, I don't know, there's just an element of like one group upholds the Bible over every single thing else, and that is the only truth, and that is the only thing that you can ever tell them, and all of that. And then the other group has just a more nuanced view of things, I feel like. And no shade to anybody, but that's just what I see. Because again, like, and I've questioned my atheism a lot, and I have tried to open my mind up to believing in some type of higher power, and I'm just not there. You know what I mean? Like, no. And I get a lot of pressure, I feel like, from some people to try to believe in God, and I'm like, I just don't, man.
I see. I see. Yes.
And like, and I very much support freedom of religion. I am all for you to practice, anybody who's watching, you to practice what you believe in and do that wholeheartedly, as long as you're not hurting anybody else. But like, there's also this element of like, I understand how it can do good for people, but it also has done bad. And if people literally cannot subscribe themselves to that, like, you don't want people believing in something that they don't actually believe in anyway. So that's a really weird thing. But there's a lot of people, there's some individuals who have like kind of fear mongered me, like, you never know when you're going to die, where you're going to go. And I'm like, bro, like, calm down. Like,
right. When it's like, what do you want me to do? Force myself to believe in God? And that's the whole concept, right? That I struggle with as far as religion goes, because I'm like, okay, believing in God has benefits. Like, it has objective benefits, but that doesn't mean I can make myself do it. Like, and when I say objective, I mean like it's comforting, it's, whatever. And but that doesn't mean I can make myself do it. And so it's like, okay, does God want me to pretend? Is that what I'm supposed to do? And that's what I get the most backlash on this channel for, is specifically like, oh, you left Mormonism and then you left Jesus too. What the fuck? And I'm like, well, I hope he's real. But it's like, how can I, where do you go with that? Like, okay, well, I'll just pretend until I indoctrinate myself into believing it, Anyway, that's kind of a tangent. But okay,
It's a
one last.
weird, yeah, it's a weird
Oh,
thing.
go
Yeah.
ahead.
Go ahead.
So, one thing I wanted your perspective on before we close is that recently I've been looking more into politics, and I'm not nearly as educated about it as some people, but I've been looking into it more, and I deep dived into fat activism. Have you gone to that rabbit hole yet?
I've been in every rabbit hole. I've been in all of them. It's
It
that one.
shocked me.
Mhm.
It shocked me to my core because, I left Mormonism and I still had this like authority thing of like someone else has the answers and it's people who are confident and they say things confidently, like that's it, like believe them. So I pushed myself into the fat activism stuff because I was like, this is something that I can look at and I can objectively say like this person is wrong. And it doesn't matter how confident they are wrong. Because for those who don't know that are watching the fat activism stuff, you have people who will say that you can be healthy at every size, which is absolutely not true. Being too skinny is not healthy. Being too fat is not healthy. There's thousands of studies about this. So watching that unfold for me was so eye-opening and learning to deconstruct from that like gave me some footing in like feeling like I could trust myself to think more deeply about things because I was like I can point to this and be like these arguments are so obviously wrong and I can point at why they're obviously wrong. Anyway, I had this kind of epiphany as I was, going down this fat activist uh rabbit hole, and there was okay, so someone shared this tweet or something Lizzo posted. And if you don't know who Lizzo is, she's very overweight singer, and a lot of people really like her music. I've never really even tried to listen to it, so I don't have an opinion on it, but she is very much pushing that fat activism narrative, right? And
Mhm.
what shocked me is she had this comment on her channel and it was like, Lizzo, you have changed my life. I'm so grateful for you. Like, thank you for everything that you're doing. And it shook me to my core to read that because I got those comments on my channel when I started my channel. And I was like, oh my God. Like, I had like a faith crisis all over again because I was like, as we're running these channels and stuff, something that's so scary to me, I guess, is that like, we can put content out there and be so confident about it and get all these people who are validating our opinion, and it turns out that like we're just totally wrong, and that keeps me on my toes, but I think it's a good thing to recognize that. It's just an interesting concept. So then After School did this really cool video. I can't remember if I sent it to you because I thought about it, but After School did this video of being brainwashed by your audience, and I was like, holy shit, this is so cool. And this is why I love where I'm at in my life because I'm like, I'm not going to rely on these comments one way or the other, the good comments or the bad comments. Like, I'm going to listen to them, like you said, with that maturity of do these have a perspective that I need to change something? But I'm also going to think about what principles in my life am I founding my decisions on? Am I founding my content on? And trying to use that as the driving force instead of just like, oh, that got me some positive comments. Like, talk about that more. You know what I mean? I want to hear your thoughts.
There's a lot of people who let support go to their head and they get
Right.
egotistical and they become very inflated versions of themselves, right? And I appreciate so much that people have given me the opportunity to get my voice out there because the more subscribers, the more followers you have, the better your videos are going to do naturally, the bigger reach you're going to have, right? And I like, it's very strange to me. I get called a grifter a lot. That's just the new insult of like, oh, you're on the internet. And I got called like my channel is monetized, but I was getting those comments way before I ever made a dime off of anything I ever posted, like
So,
for months on
grifter,
it.
what
You
does
know what I
that
mean?
mean?
Like,
Like, you just want money? Is that what that means?
So grifter actually the like I've looked up the definition because I was like, what does this mean? Like, a grifter is like a con artist essentially, and they're trying
Oh,
to
right,
sell
right.
you faulty wares or
Yeah.
manipulate you into giving you their money. And it's like, well,
That's funny.
I sure hope nobody feels manipulated into giving me like, and rarely anybody ever like actually like donates or anything like that. I'm just monetized through the YouTube program or whatever. So like many other people, and it's just because it takes time, and time
Yeah.
is valuable,
A
and my
lot of
time is
time. Yeah.
valuable. And there's a lot of people who devote all of their time into making videos, so they need to be monetized, to have that income. It's like people have to live, so it's just a different way to create an income. And I do see the fear that people might have in that there are people who lie on the internet for attention and for money and
Yeah.
to create revenue sources, right? And they have the potential to get really, really big sometimes. But I never set out to make money. It was more like, wow, I could get monetized. Like, all right, like, okay, like
Yeah.
that's awesome. Like I saw it as just a benefit to what I was already doing, and an opportunity for me to be able to pro, devote more of my time into making videos, because if I'm making a paycheck off of this in some way, or benefiting from this in some way, then I can devote more of my time to it, because it's, you know what I mean? It's that
Yes.
mutual relation.
Yes.
Like it's just a beneficial relationship. Like I can make my content better and be able to pay my bills. Like, so it's like,
Yeah.
and I have a freelance job anyways and stuff like that. So it's just, but it's interesting to me because the whole grifter thing, people say that I'm lying for attention and I'm lying for clicks and views, and or I sensationalize things, or I'm a reactionary and I just want to outrage. And it's like, I don't feel like that's my goal. I try to be really centered. I try to be calm in my videos. I have made a few TikToks where I'm kind of more like, I don't know, not even outraged, but just more like loud and kind of it was just like a one of those days. I feel like you just feel more sassy than another. And I just don't do that a lot because that's just like, I don't like all of the outrage crap. I don't like the reactionary crap. I don't like the people who just do things for clicks and views. I put a message out there and I hope it does well. And because I hope it reaches more people and so that they can hear it. I don't want to be like it's so funny to me. It's like I have so much damn anxiety. It's actually really hard for me to do this. And
Right.
it
Right.
it's difficult to put yourself out there and know damn well how much you will be criticized and how much you will be vilified and how people will distort any little thing that you say. And that's difficult, and it's difficult for anybody. And all of a sudden, like my YouTube went from, I had a couple hundred subscribers, and then all of a sudden all my shorts really took off, and people just started streaming in, and it went through that same whole process again that I did on TikTok, because it was happening much faster on YouTube. And all of a sudden it's
Yeah.
like so to think that I only want to do things for money or attention, I feel like, you can think whatever you want in the end, but that was never my goal and it never will be my goal. If I
Yeah.
can create a revenue source off of something that I enjoy doing already, I think that's just more beneficial. And I think that people just use it as an insult as opposed to actually thinking that, or, there's just a lot of people who lie
Right.
too.
Or to like, yeah, one for people to jump in there and be like, you're just trying to make money instead of like acknowledging the points you brought up. That's what bugs me the most is when people will comment.
Mhm.
They're like, "Oh, you just blah blah blah," and I'm like, "Did you even watch the video? Like, can you watch it and then tell me what you think?" Like, so I could totally relate. Yeah, because people are
Yeah.
just sometimes they're just gonna say what they say, and like you said, the more we can take that as an opportunity to grow, better for us because otherwise profession will crush you. Because I don't know.
Yeah.
It's so easy to think like, oh, it's like all these followers, all these views can make me feel so good. And it's like, no, oftentimes it makes you feel really bad because you feel insecure and people are criticizing you and you feel all this pressure to deliver on a certain quality. And, and it's like, you got to not get lost in all of that. And that's why you got to have your trajectory solid. And that's why lately I've been proud of myself to, okay, like, what are my values? Honesty, right? Integrity, like these things matter to me, and my family, right? My family matters to me, and I'm unwilling to let those things get lost in translation. And that's hard to do, but I'm trying, and I feel like aiming for that is the right thing to do. Anyway, this is a long tangent from why I had you here, but I was just really excited to get your perspective on it as someone who has been blowing up recently. So that's really cool.
Yeah. I do apologize. I don't think I actually accurately answered that. Also, I got lost in my own tangent, but I will say this is that, me personally, when it comes to people who support me, like that means so much to me in such a special way of like, wow, like you think what I have to say is valuable. It's not that I think people like me. Like I don't have an inflated sense of ego whatsoever. I don't even think I'm particularly that intelligent, and I don't think there's anything extraordinary about me. That's the weirdest part. Is I get a lot of comments like saying like you're so wise and you're so smart and all of this, and I take that and I appreciate what you're saying and I appreciate the sentiment, but I don't particularly believe that. I think there's a big flaw in being a content creator that, there's two sides of the coin. It's like either you hone in on all the negative comments way too much, or you hone in on all the positive comments way too much, and you let that inflate your ego. And I just I refuse to allow myself to lose myself and lose what I stand for just because people like what I have to say. And that's why I make that distinction. People might not like me, or I don't automatically think they like me. They appreciate my viewpoint and my ideas that I'm sharing.
They
with
resonate
the world.
with what you're saying. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the most important part.
Well, and that's why I resonated with you right off the bat, was because in your I Left the Left video, I think it was in that one, you mentioned what actually makes you a good person. You said like, what actually makes you a good person? Is it the political ideas? Because why would that be it? Like, why is that where we want to draw the line of like, these are good people that have these political ideas? Like, that sounds terrible. And I loved when you said that, because I do feel like in the last couple years, in the last year especially, that has been what I've been trying to break down for myself, is like, what makes me a good person and how can I work on that and focus on that and not get lost in the good comments, get lost in the bad comments, get lost in the trying to get more views, like, because it's so easy to just like get totally swept away with all of that. Like you said, I like the way you said on either end. Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because there's so many people who like have reached out to me and they have smaller channels, like yourself, you got a good sub count going. And I've had people reach out to me with like around what you have or way less than what you have, and they've been like, I understand if you don't want to come on and talk to me. I understand, like I'm like just this tiny, and I'm like, bro, like what are you talking about? Like I'm not up here. Like this is the internet. Like it's not like, if I like you and I want to talk to whoever I can, like I want to share ideas with people and be able to get to know people and make connections and have that community, because that's a big problem too with like that atheists don't want to acknowledge, is like there's no community within atheism, and then you get lost in this community. Like from my perspective, I got lost in this community of the left, of people who say that they're these amazing, wonderful, compassionate people, but when it comes down to it, that's only if you agree with them. And a lot more people on the right that I've met are much more willing to accept differences and just like different perspectives and stuff like that, and still acknowledge like, oh, you're a good person, you just think differently than me. Like, and I don't ever want to fall into that trap again or whatever. But anyway, like it's very strange to me that people think like I'm which I do it too. I'm like, I have this weird, you know, it's called a parasocial relationship, when you watch somebody a lot and you really enjoy them and you kind of view them as like this famous person because like it's like internet fame or whatever.
Yeah.
And I've made the mistake of doing that with people, and you know, in the past and stuff. And now it's really funny. It's like there's so many channels that I've watched for so long, and you know, I look at their sub count now, and I'm like, whoa, like how do I have more subs than you? I've been watching you forever, and I feel bad. Like I feel guilty. Like I'm like I don't feel like I earned
like
this.
I
feel like
didn't
everybody
deserve
just like
it or something. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
like
yes.
yeah, and like that makes me like I'm like like because like people work so hard, and that's why I just always want to make sure I come back to like I just appreciate this so much. I appreciate people being willing to listen and wanting to hear what I have to say and subbing and following and all of that, because man, there's people who have fought for years and years and years and years and built their channels from the ground up. And I feel like I just got catapulted out of nowhere, and I don't know why. And I don't, and I always kind of come back to, I'm like, why are you here? Like, what is happening? But I just appreciate it so much. And it just humbles me even more when I see people like that. And, you know, you yourself said you've been doing YouTube for a number of years. And it's just like, man, people have put in so much more time than I have. And it makes me feel a little bit of pressure. Like I have to really live up to expectations, but I also have to keep in mind, like, I'm new here and I'm just starting and I'm trying to figure it all out and I'm trying to do my best, and that's all I can hope to do. And so, but sorry for that, but it's just very interesting to try to dissect it. You know, I do that too much.
I love it. I love it. Well, and this is why I was really excited to have you on, because I feel like when I was watching, I was like, we're similar ages. Our kids are similar ages. Like we have a lot in common and running these channels and everything. And so I just love hearing your perspective on it all, because I don't have any other friends that are dealing with these kind of things, you know, and it's very validating. And I think it's so I love that whole like guilt complex and the imposter syndrome and all that, like totally relate with that. And as far as I can tell, that's just normal. Everybody feels that way. But it's one of those things where it's like, I think, you know, I just keep waiting for someone to give me permission to do this, like to really do it, you know? And I'm just like, okay, I gotta like just give myself permission, I guess. And that's what it is, though. It's like I got, you know, and that's a hard thing to do. And then like you said, being catapulted into the success, and then all this pressure, right? All this pressure to perform well, because you have like thousands and thousands of people watching everything you post. And like that is wild to me. Like what a psychological adventure that is, you know? Because I already feel like, you know, a lot of pressure, you know, just when videos get hundreds of views is still a lot of people, a lot more people than most people have ever been able to talk to at one time, you know? And I think I love the way that you're approaching it with a lot of humility and grace. And I also think that you should be proud of yourself too. And I think you are. Because part of what catapulted you into success was that people really liked your content, you know, and that means something, you know. So that's
yeah,
cool.
It's funny too, because like there's a lot of people who are very creative, who are very artistic, who make amazing, beautiful, well thought, like really, really cool content, you know, like even if it's just transitions, like of, you know, like the TikTok transitions and stuff like this. Some people have just such cool stuff. And I just set up a camera and I just talk to it. And I think like,
right.
there's an element of me that is like, wow, like people like what I have to say that much. Like, and that's interesting. And it's like I've never actually gotten like 1 million views on one video over on TikTok, but I've gotten like, I have a couple of shorts here on YouTube that I've gotten like 2 million or 3 million, or like, you know, and I think my whole channel overall has gotten like, I think last I looked, it was like 14 million views. And that just like, I don't know. That's a lot. That is so much. And I've never, my whole life has been just you know, a lot of people not ever caring about what I had to say, right? And then to just think about that number and try to picture it You know, I think it's just really
It's
important that like
crazy.
to keep that in mind. Like it's overwhelming, that's for sure. But
It's crazy. The biggest video I had is like 30,000 views. And I cannot possibly wrap my mind around it. Not at all. One time I was at this conference and there was like 200 people that I was speaking in front of, and I was like, it's like that's every time I post a video. Like there's more like 5, 10 times more than that are watching what I say. And yeah, I'm not nervous recording a video, but I'm nervous in front of these people. It's just like you can't picture it. You can't possibly
you know
like
what's really funny about that is I go through that when I do live videos. So
yeah,
like I have like it's like stage fright when I do live
yes,
videos, and
yes.
I get really, really nervous because a lot of times when I'm thinking, I just want to make sure that I'm conveying my ideas in the best
Yeah,
way that I can, right? So I'll just kind of
right.
stop and I'll collect myself. And so like when I'm doing live stuff, I get like it's literally like I'm standing in front of a crowd, and if I can see
Yes,
the number of people that are watching, it's like stage fright. Like I just clam up and
crushing.
my brain stops working, and I've always had like I've never done well with that. Like I've never done well with like people will be like, you should do public speaking, and I'm like, oh, I'd have to work on that, my friends. Like
Right,
I'd have to.
it's a different realm, it really is, like and even, like, doing
Yeah.
a live is so different than talking in front of a group of people. Because 'cause I've done some speeches and, like, it's so different than doing a live even, but yes, the lives make me so nervous. That's why this year I, like, had a goal. I was like, "I'm gonna do lives, like, every week if I can, like, just get a guest, have a discussion, have fun," and it has, like, been such a growth opportunity, but man, it some days it crushes me because I sit there like afterward, like, oh my God, all the stupid things I said or I didn't say. But it's so good for me, because it's like learning to give myself that room to make mistakes, that room to be learning to like it's the man in the arena, right? Like the what's his name? The president, uh Theodore Roosevelt. He has this little story poem, whatever. It's called The Man in the Arena. It's all about how like you got to be down there and fighting and not listening to the people that are sitting on the sidelines that don't really know what it's like to be down there fighting. And I just love that so much. And
Yeah.
truly
Yeah.
we're all the man in the arena in our own lives, but sometimes I think we like to sit on the sidelines and pretend that we aren't, and that like, well, I could do that, but then I might look stupid, and it's like, well, you look stupid pretending that like you're not in the arena. And so I think that's kind of a cool way of looking at it too.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson actually, I saw a clip of his the other day, and he said something like somebody asked him like, "How do you deal with people um, who don't want to be receptive to you or don't want to listen to what you have to say and all of that, or just being negative and nasty towards you?" And he just straight up said, "Don't talk to them. Like, don't talk to those people. Don't talk to the people that don't like you. Don't give them the time. Talk to the people that you know like you, and like frame everything to those individuals who are receptive of what you have to say, because it's just more productive, and it eliminates that sense of like I have to be on the defense all of the time
Yes,
and
yes.
defend
I have to
myself to people
over
who
explain. Yes. Yeah, I
yeah,
love that.
and I
Yeah.
struggle with that too, because I do have people pleasing qualities about
Yeah.
me, and I've noticed that, and I don't want I never want to pander to anyone, and I try very hard not to. And it's like
Yeah.
there's things that I know I'm like, oh, like, like I was saying, like I'm gonna piss off this bunch of people. I'm gonna piss off. I always piss off the left. That's fine. Like I always do. And it's just strange. It's a strange place to be. And I also like I said, I don't try to be offensive. I really don't. I don't try to be mean. I don't try to demean anyone. And so like to be always painted in that light, it just gets exhausting sometimes. But it's also what like, I signed up for this. Like, I'm the one who's doing it. I'm the one who's putting my views out there. I better be ready to take the consequences for it, you know? And that comes with some certain social ramifications at some points. And it's just an interesting road to go down, I feel like, and explore and learn how to be a better person. And I think that's the problem is people let social media stardom go to their head. And so they want to keep their fan base and make sure that they don't say any of the wrong things. And it's like, if you want to unfollow me or unsubscribe for one thing that I ever said, then that's fine. And that's your choice. And I'm the same way as you in that I try really hard not to let that happen. Like if I like somebody and I like what they're saying, and I find out they have a different viewpoint on something, I don't just boot them from my like For You page or from my subscriptions, or like there's a lot of people actually who I don't agree with on a lot of things, but I like how they say their views and I like the way they're going about it. So I'll just follow them so I can get more of their content and help that provide a different perspective, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have taken up so much of your time. Thank you so much. Any closing thoughts you want to share? And I might break this up into 2 videos because this was kind of like we had the you leaving the left, but then I was so fascinated to ask you about the YouTube stuff. So I might break it up, but we'll just see. So any closing thoughts on either topic?
I think overall I've learned so much in such a short amount of time. And, you know, this is something that I feel like has unlocked a lot of future opportunities that I never thought possible in a lot of different ways. And I've always had my own goals, but I've found this new path that has opened up, and it's because of so many people who appreciate what I have to say. And I'm so grateful for that. And I'm so grateful to be kind of walking this path, and I'm not sure where it's going to lead in the end. But it's just a new doorway of opportunity. And all it comes down to is like me being, people call me brave a lot, right? And I don't necessarily think that I'm that brave. I think I'm just willing to put it out there and say what a lot of people think and bring common sense back. And, you know, I just want people to see the humanity in one another again. I think that's also really important. We've gotten into these tribalistic us versus them mindsets to such a firm degree that, like, again, like people see purple hair and they think I'm crazy. And it's like, I don't necessarily think that about anybody. I don't want people to just view how somebody looks in a certain way, whether that's their dress, whether that's their skin color, whether that's their gender, whether that's, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want anybody to think, oh, you must think this way because you look this way. It's like, no, we've gone through that in society and we kind of got out of it a little bit. And now we're right back in it again because of these tribalistic views and the authoritarianism that I think is creeping up on the left most of all. And at this point, the right is just trying to push back. That's all that's happening is the left is going very extreme and the right is trying to like bring it back and like, no, like, and I just want people to just stop and think for a moment about what you believe and why, and really dissect that and be willing to challenge yourself on every single viewpoint that you have. And if you have confidence in it, then you don't have to resort to name calling. You don't have to resort to shutting people down. You don't have to resort to shaming anybody or thinking that they're a bad person just because they think a different way than you. Actions say a lot more about who's a good person and who's a bad person. And if all you're doing is screaming and yelling at people and name calling, then are you really as good as you think you are? And I think that's something that nobody ever said to me, because I was very like, and how you say the judgmental aspect of like being Mormon and then leaving that and not wanting to be judgmental. Well, if you get into another group where all they're doing is judging people based on perceived hatred, like that's what it comes down to, is like, I'll say something, somebody perceives it as hateful, even if I'm not intending it, even if there's no hatred in my heart, I'm just saying what I think. And if you perceive that as hateful and then you take that as free license to treat me however you would like, you're the hateful one, you know? And not enough people are acknowledging that in my opinion. But anyway, I just hope that people can just calm down, level their emotions a bit more, learn how to operate from a more like, just controlled, calm place. And I think our discussions and conversations will be a lot more beneficial in the long run, and society will be better. So
Right. And the more we understand each other, the more we can all move forward together. Right. I love it.
and that's
Ashley,
that's a big thing.
Ashley, thank you so much for being here, for doing this video with me. I was so excited about it. And just so I was like nervous and excited, and this conversation was incredible. So if you're here, hit the subscribe button, comment your thoughts down below, and go check out Ashley's stuff. She's got some awesome content. I know in this video we didn't get so much into why you have the opinions that you do, and so feel free to go check out her content. She explains things very well in her videos and her shorts. She's got tons of them. They are really good. So feel free to go check that out to understand more. If you're wondering like her political opinions, you can get more clarity on that. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.